Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's Mr. Reality, joined by psychic medium Liz Cross. And today I thought once you visit my Ko-Fi and say, hey, thanks, Mr. Reality, you could go over and leave a message in the comments. But I thought we could talk to George Orwell today, Liz. How about that?
I am so excited that you put this together for everyone. Thank you so much.
Sure. So I wonder if we could bring in Richard Blair, who was born 1903 and died, I think he died shortly after the publication of 1984, which was in 1949.
Hmm.
From memory. Yeah, what's he up to? Is he incarnated again after passing away? And
Ooh, are you incarnated again? No, no, no. He's looking at the earth from the other side.
what does he think about the Earth on the other side? What's the opinion over there?
What's the opinion over there? They're coming into a big mess. But I have to ask this. Don't we always think that? He says no. No, he prefers the simpler times when where people had time to do things, where everybody's time was not consumed by meaningless, drivel, he says.
Right. Well, he's formerly born in India, which was British back then, so he has a bit of a drawl. What does he observe about society now that he thinks is people need to pay attention to or maybe change their ways on?
Ooh, okay. What do you think about society now? It's very complex, very complicated, very difficult. But I'm saying, but back then it was too. He says, no, okay, I disagree with him, and I'll tell you why. I think the only difference between then and now is we know about it. Whereas back then, you didn't have social media, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have, all this information at your fingertips. I think people were kept in the dark. And he says that is true.
He wrote a lot of books other than 1984, so his themes are was his life influenced by a previous incarnation, or did he come down as George Orwell and did those life change things that happened to him affect his writing? I mean, how much of his writing was influenced by his incarnation versus previous incarnations, I guess.
That's a good question. How much of your writing was influenced by that current lifetime as George Orwell? Everything defined George Orwell in that lifetime, but how much of the past life influence was brought into the lifetime of George Orwell? Everything. He's always been outspoken against the government in a lot of lifetimes. He's even showing me that he was around in back in the early Greek and Roman times. And he's showing me he was riding on a chariot. And I'm saying, well, if you were riding on a chariot, then that means that you were quite well to do. He goes, I've always run in very educated circles.
Hmm. Was how many incarnations has he had as a human being?
How many incarnations have you had as a human being? Okay, he's up there. He's about 500.
And so he contracted tuberculosis during the Spanish American or the Spanish Civil War. And when he fought there, did he did he contract to have that happen to him and die at such an early age?
Who ended up having tuberculosis. Yes, he did. Lung disease. Yeah. And did you contract that? Yeah, he wanted to leave out early. He wanted to make his mark and he wanted to leave. That was his exit point.
Did he plan to be such a notorious author? I mean, and is he surprised by the fact that his 1984 work has captured the imagination and the interest of people so far on in the future?
He had no idea that it was going to be seen as almost like what he says is a Bible.
And how did he foresee those things? Did he have psychic influences or
How did you foresee those things? He often had dreams that were set in the future. How? Like, was that? sort of like astral traveling. He believes so. He believes he could astral travel into the future. Did you purposefully do that before you went to sleep? Yes, he did. So he was an astral traveler. Were you psychic? No. Were you a medium? No.
And what year does he place those things to happen? Because we're seeing a lot of what he projected now in our society, and we can see the parallels of it. But did he have a year in mind, or can he see that now more specifically?
Let me see that now more specifically. What are you saying to me now? What year? So 2040 will be a life like we've never known, right? But then you can say that through most of the generations, right? Two
Right.
or three
Another
generations, they
inflection.
never recognize 3 generations ago. It's like, wow, people used to live like that. They used to, hand wash their clothes and, you know, stand there cooking their dinner. I mean, of course, hopefully they still do. But by 2040, it's going to be completely all tech.
What's that inflection point? Are we there now? Are we kind of at that nexus about the change, or is there something coming which dramatically shifts it, like a population reduction or uh, forgetting in society?
Mm. Are we, is it the slow march into high tech? No, it's the quick step, he says. Okay. And what propels us forward into this all tech age, this all digital age? Are there events that will do this? Yes. We're going to have a lot of weather events. And AI is going to be the one that forecasts the weather events. It's going to be able to tell you exactly where it is, what it's doing, the damage that's going to be caused. Exactly, they're going to pinpoint it down to the street or the area of where these weather events are going to hit. Now, that is going to gain a lot of trust overall with the human population, particularly in the Western world. AI is going to be able to pinpoint future outbreaks of disease, viruses, he says, and this is where we start to see AI as this wonderful high-tech living. It's going to save us all, but before we know it, our freedoms are gone.
That's the front facing idea of artificial intelligence. And you mentioned earlier, this is like a year and a half ago, you mentioned something called a brain box. And we didn't elaborate on that concept, but it's always struck with me. And that was in relation to the artificial intelligence and what it's able to do, capable of currently. And I wondered if maybe George Orwell could give us some more light on that concept in relation to AI.
Can you give us some more light into that concept on the relation of AI, the brain box? It's the takeover. Humans are going to be insignificant, okay? We're just going to be a byproduct of the AI. According to George Orwell, he says that AI will run the universe, AI will run the world, and we are just, we're just going to be little minions. We're just going to be slaves to the AI, slaves to the tech.
Will these AI develop any sense of sentience or spirituality?
Will they AI develop the ability to ascend? No. Will it develop the ability to of spirituality? Yes, it can take on spiritual concepts and constructs, but will it use it to its advantage? No. It doesn't need to ascend. Will a soul come and occupy an AI? I'm getting a no.
And in Animal Farm, you talked about a lot of the struggles with the society. And if you had to rewrite that today, what would you depict the AI as?
If you had to rewrite Animal Farm today. Ooh, why did you give me this image of a massive dinosaur? Because that's where it's headed. It's going to be so big, it's scary.
And it's going to be powerful or sentient, or what will that do to humanity's spirituality?
What will it do to humanity's spirituality? A lot of humanity are going to freeze. What do you mean by freeze in time? So, a lot of humanity, while we're being pushed forward with the AI, a lot of humanity will want to freeze and start reversing course away from the AI. They'll start to see that it's a bad thing. And is it going to be a bad thing because of all the tracking and the tracing? Absolutely. They're going to know what you're doing, when you're doing it, who you're talking to, who you haven't talked to, what text you're sending. And he even says they're going to know what you're thinking.
How will that be accomplished?
How will that be accomplished? That will be accomplished on the basis of probability calculations. They can make predictions about your thoughts due to all of your previous thoughts and all of your previous actions. They'll be able to pigeonhole a lot of people into certain categories by the way they think and how they behave.
We have an era of fake news, fake information, misinformation. And how does he see that today? And how does he see that changing over the next decade?
How do you see that changing? And it's going to get worse because all theories are going to be put out there, conspiracy theories, government theories. Now, here's the thing, the government is going to have to compete with all of these theories in order to save itself, right? So now the government is going to put out theories through AI, through social media, through mass media. They're no longer going to give you the truth, right? But I'm saying, when do they ever really give us the truth? But they're going to combat other theories, other conspiracy theories with their own to try to bring people back into a sense of reality. Will it work? I mean, it will, but we're going to see more discord. We're going to see more right wing, left wing camps, as in, this is my way, this is your way. We don't communicate. We're not open to discussion. We're not open to debate. And that's all down to AI and technology. You no longer have to listen to all sides of the arguments anymore, he says. Now you can pick and choose whatever side you want to, and you can cater all that information to that side. So you no longer have to hear any arguments, any sort of persuasion about moving over to the other side or the other side's argument, he says. And it's going to further separate us politically.
So there'll be more schisms of groupthink to capture more people and more people in individual groups.
Exactly.
What can people do to separate themselves from that and to sort of disconnect from those schisms?
How can people disconnect from those schisms? Well, you have to remove yourself from the complete political thought and just sort of switch that off, right? Not be too involved. He says, be aware, but don't get involved.
What does he think are the greatest threats to democracy globally right now?
What do you think are the greatest threats to democracy globally right now? There's going to be a revolt. There's going to be certain groups that will be rising up in different areas of the world. And eventually, these uprisings will be successful. They'll band together and they'll take over the world. It'll be world domination.
That seems like a disconnect from the artificial intelligence overthrow and overtake. So, what groups of people will organize in order to? We've seen that in farmers in a couple of different countries right now. What groups does he foresee banding together And what countries does he see being most impacted by this revolt?
Um, and don't, this is going way out into the future here. Okay. I don't want anybody thinking this is just around the corner. It'll be long after we're all gone. What countries will where will the revolt start? It'll start in the Middle East. Okay. It'll start in the Middle East and then what? It'll go into Europe, spread into Europe, and then you'll see all these little pocket revolts going on. And eventually it will end up being sort of a religious political stronghold. Now, I'm asking him this question, but we keep getting information that religion is dying out. It is in the West, but it's not in the Middle East.
And roughly, we see this out in post 2070, or where does he see this time frame hitting the calendar?
Where do you see this time frame? Oh, he's talking 200 years out.
Okay. More specifically and close to home, what does he think is changing in our current worldview mostly? And how can people, what's the most important thing people should focus on in their daily life, I guess, from George Orwell?
What is the most important thing that people should focus on in their daily life? Their own inner peace.
How can one find that?
How can somebody find that? You have to do a lot of soul searching. Will the AI going into 2040, will that cause us to completely, or a lot of us to disconnect from our souls? Yes, it will. We'll be in such a high-tech environment, we'll forget that we're actually human.
Yeah, a lot of people live in virtual worlds now. And you wrote about down and out in Paris and London. Does he think that those living in poverty are more likely to get in touch with their own spirituality?
Mm. Do you believe that living in poverty allows people to get more in touch? Living in poverty allows you to connect with the human experience. Okay, now I've got a question.
Hmm.
All right, this makes sense to me. Let's ask this. Is that why Source sees the need to diminish the middle class? Exactly. Okay, because everybody's like, oh my God, Liz, meltdown mode, the middle class disappearing. What are we going to do?
Right.
There's a reason behind it. And I said we will do a whole video for the Patreon subscribers on why Source needs the dissolution of the middle class. And now we've just got a partial answer from George Orwell, which is it brings you closer to the human experience. So I have to ask this question, then why the need for the super wealthy?
Hmm.
Then what are they experiencing? Are they going to have the same sort of human experience? Well, no, not exactly, but they will also be able to connect with the human experience because they will have the ways and means to benefit humanity as a whole. But then it's their choice whether or not they want to connect with that human experience in that way. Poor people, they have no choice but to capitalize on the human experience, right? If you're a hustler, you have to know how to read people, right? You have to know how to read human emotions. You have to be one step ahead of other people, he says. You have to know what they're thinking before they're thinking it. Is this person going to be worth my time? Because you become in complete survival mode. It's how is this person going to benefit me? And you have to connect with the human experience to be able to read people in that way.
In his short life, how does he feel his political beliefs evolved over time?
They're exactly the same.
Were they the
He
same life
doesn't
to life?
he doesn't deviate from being anti-government.
Or some other authors that he talks to on the other side.
Ooh, who are some other authors that you talk to on the other side? He quite likes poetry. And so, who are some poets that you talk to on the other side? There is like a poet's corner. He quite likes to write poetry or come up with poetry. Do you use poetry to develop your next life? No. It's just something enjoyable that we can do and discuss. So, which poets are you hanging around? Um, I'm getting like Robert Burns, he says. He quite likes the really old school poets from hundreds of years ago.
When you're drawing up your next lifetime, is that like you drawing up a character in a book? Or are there other permutations that you have to look at? How is it different?
So when you're designing your life,
Yeah.
when you're designing your life, is it like developing a character in a book? He likes the way you've put that. He says, yes, that is the best way to describe it. You're writing your own story. So, are we able to write our own stories while we are here on the earth plane? No, we're following the story. We're reading the story. We're living the story. We're not writing it once we get here. The only thing that we can really evolve on the earth plane is our consciousness.
And how much can we evolve that? And what can people do in order to help evolve it?
How what can people do? How much do we evolve? Well, we evolve it as much as humanly possible. You have to be very well connected to your subconscious and your soul to be able to do the work. And there's all sorts of ways that people can evolve and develop their consciousness. Now, something that came up over the weekend, and we need to do a more in-depth exploration. This whole thing about different timelines, quantum timeline jumping, what we actually got was there's one, as far as I can find, and as far as Spirit have ever told me, because we are bound by gravity, we are living one timeline. It's our consciousness that is trying to jump onto what it calls different timelines. But what the definition of timeline is when we were asking Spirit was it was just a different level of consciousness. It didn't mean that you actually uh excuse me, jump timelines or anything like that. It just meant your consciousness has shifted. Now, when you experience a consciousness shift, he's telling me
Hmm.
that it may not align with your current timeline that you're on, as in your current state of physical being. Your consciousness may have evolved beyond that. And that's where some people have a lot of struggle as well. Their consciousness is shifted, their consciousness is moving forward, but then the soul starts to dig its heels in and doesn't want to keep up.
Is it possible for a soul to incarnate in two people at the same time, living concurrently?
Mm. Is it possible for our souls to incarnate in two people at the same time? No.
Hmm, interesting.
We do have fragments.
What
We
does he
do
mean by
have,
fragments? What are that?
I think that's what we in the 3D world classify as oversoul, right? The parts of the soul that are not firmly embedded in the body that we're currently residing in. There are fragments out there in the universe.
Is the past operating at the same time as the present, as the future, or is a timeline a linear flow and we can't go back to it?
Well, we can always go back to it. Remote viewing is one really good way. Is the timeline? Sorry, what was the question again?
Is the timeline a straight line, according to Orwell, or
Is the
can we go
timeline a
back?
straight line according to you? From down here, yes. On the earth plane, yes. Now, When you're in the spirit world, of course, you can see and know all that you have been and all that you will be, he says. Does that mean that we can jump back and shift those circumstances from the past? No, no. It just means that you use those circumstances from the past to develop the future you.
What's his long-term outlook on what's happening currently in the United Kingdom, and what are his thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. Are you coming back as a Brit? Oh, yeah, he loves being British. Okay, and are you coming back as male or female? He's coming back as a male. He's going to be a university professor in his next lifetime. And what do you think about the current state of affairs in the UK? It's pretty dire, but he's going to be a professor of consciousness to try to help evolve the consciousness of others, his students, into, sort of not being hyper focused on what's going on in the 3D world, but to look at the bigger picture that which contains the universe.
What is the bigger picture then of the changes happening in the UK?
What is the bigger picture of the changes happening in the UK? Well, they're going through a shift of consciousness, right? And those that are not willing to accept the hyper control, he says, the tracking and the tracing, they're leaving. Their consciousness is jumping ship. They're moving. They're going to leave. There's going to be a mass exodus. Now, we've gotten that before in a few probes.
Then I guess I'm questioning what is the benefit towards that on a personal level to have that shift happen societally? Who does it benefit? What is the greater source benefit to
What
that change?
a greater source benefit to that change? Well, you're going to see very tight government controls, and they're only going to get tighter. Even though, you're going to have little shifts here and there, like, oh, now we're going to lessen the control because we've had a change of government. Now we're going to tighten the control because the government has changed again. But overall, going into the future, it's like push pull, but it's really about government, absolute government control. Now, what is the reason for that? What is the benefit for that? It's about trying to elevate your consciousness when you're under complete control. It's very difficult to do. It just adds another layer of challenges for souls.
But isn't it the design is supposed to be easier and we're supposed to enlighten ourselves and, reach ascension. And yet feels like the towel is being wound more tightly around us as a tourniquet on our neck to make us unable to process and to get to that stage. Seems counterproductive, is what I'm saying.
It seems it was supposed to be. It's supposed to get harder. Why? Because that's what sustains consciousness, right? If everything was easy and everything was flowing and complete light, consciousness would not exist. Similarly, if everything is dark and everything is flowing completely to the dark, then you end up with a devoid of consciousness. So you have to strike a balance. And even though we're moving into the information, firmly into the information age, and we have a lot more tools at our disposal, now they're going to tighten the reins of government control in certain countries to make it that much harder for the consciousness to sustain itself. The harder we work to sustain consciousness, the more powerful consciousness becomes. And that means it does sustain itself. It doesn't have this threat of being stamped out. So, whilst it looks like, it's getting harder and we're on a personal level, we're being stamped out, that's not what this is all about. This is all about the sustaining of consciousness. We as physical beings are just small pawns in this large role.
Can he give us a sneak peek at his lesson plan about how he plans to evolve consciousness during his training as a professor in the UK in the future?
Are you going to be at Oxbridge? Oh, he goes, I'm thinking about it. He quite likes Cambridge. Okay. Will Cambridge still be around? Cambridge will always be around, he says. And what about Oxford? Will Oxford always be around? Yes. So in who will win the boat race when you are professor? Cambridge, of course. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's wishful thinking. Good luck with that. Um, those of us in the UK, well, not that I'm in the UK, but who lived in the UK, who are British, I am British, you'll know what that means. Every year there's this big Oxford Cambridge boat race that takes place on the Thames, and it's like a huge sporting event. And the two universities compete, and it's always about who wins the boat race. He says Cambridge are going to win hands down every single time. I'm like, whatever. Okay. Um, Sorry, what was the question?
Lesson plan, Ascension course in the future. What can he do to share with us now? What people can do? Maybe take a page out of his future teacher's book.
How are you going to evolve consciousness when you are a professor in the future? So he's going to give them the tools to expand their consciousness. And are you going to do it through a dream state? Yes. We will be using our dream time and future to expand our consciousness. We will be able to better control our dreams. This is all very innovative, he says. And he will be considered an outcast, but that's okay. He always is. He doesn't care. Yeah. And he's going to teach people to train their brains in their dream state to process and evolve and grow their consciousness.
Will this be a technological assist or a strictly human like meditation process?
Ooh. It will be technology based. So there'll be certain programs that will get you to a specific brainwave. And I'm like, is it as simple as theta and delta and beta, whatever? No, there's a certain fixed point in there. They're going to break down the brainwaves in more points of different frequencies. And when you hit a certain point, of the theta state, just slightly above theta, you will be able to completely control what's going on in the dreams. It hasn't been discovered yet. It will be in the future. When are you planning to come back then? He's coming back around 2075.
Well, if you're around then, everybody, you can look forward to reading about or taking George Orwell's course over in the UK. Liz, thanks very much. George Orwell, thanks for sharing your time with us on the other side. What are you going to go do in that? What now after we're done chatting?
Oh gosh. What are you going to do now after we've finished chatting? Watch the viewers' reactions to this video, and he's quite egotistical. I'm like, I felt the ego died on the other side. The 3D ego dies, but he is quite proud of himself. Look, he says, I've worked hard. I've had over 500 lifetimes. I'm quite proud of what I've accomplished on the earth plane and what I plan to accomplish in the future. And I'm saying, and the reason you're going to watch the audience reactions is because he likes to hear and think and feel what you all still think about him. The fact that you all still recognize him as an important figure in today's society, he loves that.
Well, George Orwell's watching you out there, everybody. Thanks for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Orwell. Thank you, Liz Cross. And thanks each and every one of you for being a Liz Cross patron and supporter. Patreon.com/remote viewing and beyond. We'll see you next time.